17 days after the funeral, my son told me to be practical. He meant well, or said he did, but his tone had a manager's edge. I looked at the cold porch light and the frost on the rail, and I thought about my name on the titles, the bills I still paid, and the quiet that had finally learned my house. He said there were things to sell and decisions to make quickly. I said there were rules, and rules are a kind of handrail when the stairs are dark. The letter in my glove box would answer more clearly than my voice ever could. I am a carpenter who put down his tools a few winters ago. My hands still know a square cut from a guess. My late wife, Mary, kept our papers in a blue tin box under the hall table. I kept duplicates in the truck inside a manila folder that slid into the glove box with a small click. Titles, registrations, copies of our will, HOA guidelines from Maple Lane, with the important lines highlighted. When I say I prefer rules to arguments, I mean I have learned that paper speaks calmly when people cannot. My son Jacob called on a Tuesday. The town library still had the wreaths up, and the hardware store on River Street was running a sale on snow shovels. He said Christmas would be easier if I came to their place. He used the word easier like a pad that covers a bruise. I told him I would bring bread and a small gift for the children. He said no gifts were necessary, maybe just a conversation about assets. I touched the cool edge of the hall table and said I would bring what the conversation deserved. The truth is simple and awkward. We had not spoken much for years. Life moved, jobs shifted, and we let calls go to voicemail. When Mary got sick, I sent updates by text. He answered some and missed others. I do not keep a ledger of that kind, but a father can tell when a son holds him at arm's length. After the funeral, the silence broke open. Suddenly there were checklists, timelines, and folders that did not belong to me. It sounded like adult children overstepping in the name of efficiency. I do not mind help. I mind being managed like a broken chair. On Thursday morning, I stopped by Miller's Hardware and picked up a roll of red tags they use for inventory. The clerk, who has known me since the church roof project, asked after the family. I said we were taking it one page at a time. Across the street, the library's door chimed softly when I pushed it open. Ms. Cole, the head librarian, showed me how to access the county recorder's site again. She printed a simple guide for me, 3 steps on one page, with room for notes. When the mind is heavy, she said, a checklist can feel like a prayer. I wrote down passwords and kept the paper flat with my palm. That afternoon, I opened the glove box and slid the manila folder onto my lap. I added a letter Mary had written during a quiet week, the summer before she started sleeping downstairs. It was not a legal instruction. It was a simple letter about how we wanted our home to feel when one of us was gone. She wrote that we should keep the porch light gentle and the dinner table open. She wrote that boundaries are a kindness because they teach people where the good ground begins. I read that line twice, then tucked the letter under the copies of the truck title and the small map I kept of the neighborhood. On the Saturday before Christmas, Jacob called again. He mentioned the garage. He said Aaron had arranged for a man to stop by and look at my tools. He thought selling them quickly would be wise. He said the truck's value was strong in winter, and we should consider acting before the holidays ended. I listened and watched the winter sun fade across the maple branches, turning them into lines of ink. I said the tools had names in my hands, and they would not go anywhere by surprise. I also said that any sale of property with my name on it begins with my voice and my pen. He sighed and told me I was making this harder than it needed to be. Sunday morning at St. Mark, the pastor spoke about Joseph, who listened before he acted. I sat near the back and let the rhythm of the reading slow my breath. After the benediction, I lit a candle for Mary. The flame was small and steady. In the vestibule, Mr. Jenkins from Maple Lane's HOA shook my hand. He asked about the new porch rail I had installed in October. I mentioned the sudden interest in my garage. He said the HOA had rules about home sales and alterations that touched the exterior. He spoke in plain language, and I appreciated it. If anyone tries to change locks or move equipment that affects the property's appearance, he said, we ask for owner approval on file. Paper saves friendships. I nodded. Paper holds. 2 days later, I drove to my son's house. The neighborhood was newer and louder. The porch lights seemed brighter, and the trucks in the driveways looked like they laughed at snow. The front door opened before I reached the second step. Aaron's smile had an extra shine for guests and sponsors. The children were on the couch, half inside a cartoon. Jacob clapped me on the shoulder as if we were teammates meeting in the tunnel. He asked about my drive and glanced at the leather briefcase in my hand. I told him the roads were clear. I set the briefcase by the hearth because the coffee table was already crowded with catalogs. Dinner was arranged like a display. The ham had a ribbon around the platter. The mashed potatoes sat in a bowl with a name written on the bottom. Conversation moved along rails they had laid. Work updates, a neighbor's renovation, a plan to convert part of the den into a home office. I offered small comments that did not get in the way. Mostly, I listened for the place where the real discussion would begin. It arrived with coffee, which was served in cups that said joy in gold letters. Jacob looked at me over the rim of his cup. Dad, he said, we should talk about next steps. You've got assets that need managing. We can streamline the house, the truck, and the garage. There's a life insurance payout and the accounts. We can consolidate and move you into something low maintenance closer to us. He said we, as if the word could carry me like a boat. I let the silence widen until the chairs creaked. Then I reached for the briefcase and placed it on my knees. Inside was not a check. It was not a grant of authority or a signature line arranged to surprise me. It was the manila folder from my glove box, which I had kept tidy even during hospital nights. On top was Mary's letter, folded once. Below it were titles, registrations, a copy of the HOA guidelines, and a one-page list from the library in Ms. Cole's careful font. I set the letter aside and slid the truck title toward Jacob with 2 fingers. My name was there. His eyes dropped to the line. He inhaled, shallow and quick. I want to make this easy, he said. And for a second his voice was the voice of a boy asking to borrow the car. We just thought. I know what you thought, I said, keeping my tone even. You thought grief makes people soft. It does not. It makes them clear. These are my things. This is my house. These are my tools. When I need help, I will ask for it by name. Until then, we will be careful with words like streamline and manage. They are not family words. They are office words. Erin set her cup down. We only meant practical, she said. Less burden for you. I appreciate the intent, I said. Practical begins with paper. It respects what already exists. So we will start with 3 simple boundaries. First, no locks changed or inventory moved without my permission in writing. Second, no sales discussed with strangers or neighbors under my roof. Third, no conversations about my assets with anyone but me. We can meet at the library and review anything that worries you. We can invite a neutral person if we need help reading a line. The room shifted. The children's cartoon laughed and then fell quiet. Snow tapped the living room window like a neighbor checking in. Jacob's shoulders tightened, then loosened. He looked at Erin, who looked at the briefcase like it might open its jaws. You're being dramatic, he said finally. We're trying to keep you from being taken advantage of. By who? I asked. By the men who change locks without the owner present? By the person who arranges buyers for tools she has never touched? Or by the son who uses speed as a persuasion tool? I am not angry. I am drawing lines so we can love each other safely. Boundaries are not walls. They are gates that swing on good hinges. I pulled one more page from the folder. It was a simple summary of the HOA's expectations, with 2 clauses circled in blue pen. I also set down the library step sheet for the county recorder. If you want to talk about the house, I said, we will talk with documents open. If you want to talk about the truck, we will stand by the truck and read the title. If you want to talk about tools, we will stand at the workbench together and say each tool's name. We will not treat my life like a liquidation sale. The first resistance came then, small and sharp. You're making this hard, Jacob said. We're trying to help the way people help now. They organize, they optimize, they move forward. You're stuck in paper. I am standing in paper, I said. It holds me steady. Grief is a river. Paper is a bridge. Come stand here with me. We will cross without losing each other. Erin drew a breath and let it out slowly. What would help you feel safe? She asked. Her tone shifted from sales to service, and it softened the room. What steps would make this comfortable for you? Thank you, I said. 3 steps tonight. First, please cancel the man who was coming to price my tools. Second, please give me a list of any keys you have made for my house or garage. Third, please agree that we will discuss all future changes in daylight, with documents on the table and with the children out of earshot. They deserve calm. Jacob rubbed his forehead like he had a headache that did not belong to him yesterday. He nodded once, then twice. Fine, he said. We can do that. But we still need to make plans. The house is too big for you. You should be closer to us. Plans are not bad, I said. But plans that start by removing a man from his porch are not plans. They are removals. If we ever sell the house, we will do it with respect for what Mary built into the walls. We will do it when the porch light tells us it is time, not because a calendar likes neat pages. Erin stood and gathered plates with careful hands. She was not the enemy. She was simply a woman trying to build order while the ground shifted. I helped carry dishes to the sink. The children drifted upstairs. Jacob stayed at the table with the folder like it might teach him a language quickly. When we finished in the kitchen, I returned and slid Mary's letter toward him. Read this later, I said. It is not a command. It is a reminder of the house your mother loved. He touched the folded edge as if it might burn. What if we disagree? He asked. What if we think you are making mistakes? Then we will disagree like people who intend to meet again, I said, with calm voices, with time to read, with the understanding that my life does not need a foreman. I built tables that outlived the rooms they sat in. I can build this season without being pushed. The evening thinned. I stood to go. Jacob walked me to the door, then paused, with his hand on the knob. So the boundaries are set, he said. No locks, no sales, talking daylight. Paper first? Yes, I said. And one more, because I am still your father. No shaming words. Not for me, and not for your mother's memory. We do not use practical like a stick. We use it like a level to check ourselves. He nodded. It was a small motion, but it felt like a board finding its seat. I stepped into the chill and pulled my coat close. The stars were clear, and the street was quiet enough to hear the crunch under my boots. In my truck, I rested my hand on the briefcase for a long breath. The glove box clicked shut like a drawer in a well-made cabinet. The porch light at their house glowed bright and a little lonely. Back home, the maple branches sketched slow lines against the window. I set the briefcase on the hall table and ran my finger along the blue tin box under it. The house remembered our footsteps and did not complain. I poured a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table. I wrote 3 sentences on a note card and tucked it into the folder. This is my life. We will stand on paper. We will speak without noise. I turned off the light and let the furnace hum. The night held steady, and the boundaries held with it. The next morning, I brewed coffee and read the HOA booklet again. The pages were not angry. They were simply firm. There was a clause about exterior alterations and property access. There was a line about owner authorization when workmen entered a garage. I underlined 2 sentences and pressed my palm flat to keep the book still. Then I called Mr. Jenkins and asked how to document a boundary without raising voices. He suggested a courtesy notice. He said it would be polite and clear. He said paper saves friendships again. I wrote a short note and brought it to the HOA office. The paper said no changes to locks or inventory without owner permission in writing. It said no contractors should be scheduled at my home without my direct call. It said any questions could be discussed in daylight with documents on the table. I signed and dated it, then kept a copy for my records. Mr. Jenkins stamped the HOA copy and put it in the file. The sound of the stamp was small and steady. It felt like a board set level. From there, I drove to the library. Mrs. Cole greeted me with a nod and a question about the weather. She opened the county recorder site and helped me download the current deed and a brief history. She also showed me how to print a list of liens, which was thankfully empty. We saved the documents to a small flash drive and printed 2 copies for the folder. She placed the pages into a plastic sleeve and labeled it with a date. I like when things can be found, she said with a soft smile. I thanked her for helping a man who uses wood language live in a paper world. On my way home, I stopped by the bank. I did not ask for advice. I simply asked for a letter confirming that my accounts were in my name and not accessible by anyone else. The teller wrote a request and sent it to a manager behind glass. 10 minutes later, I had a printed confirmation with a signature and a phone number for verification. It was a small document that said a simple truth. It joined the folder like a final screw snugging a hinge. Once everything was in order, I called Jacob. My voice was calm because the papers were calm. I told him about the HOA notice and the bank confirmation. I told him about the library prints and the plastic sleeve. I told him that we could meet at my kitchen table at noon, with the sun clear on the wood. He said he would come alone. He sounded tired, but that can be good when tired leads to listening. I brewed tea and set 2 mugs beside the folder. The furnace hummed, and the house kept its breath even. He arrived with snow on his shoulders and an apology in his eyes. He looked different without an audience. He looked like a boy at the workbench again, hoping his cut would square. I pointed at the chair across from me and slid the folder between us. "Before we talk," I said, "please read this notice from the HOA and this letter from the bank. They're simple. They protect us from confusion." He read without argument. He rubbed his jaw once, then twice. He nodded and said he understood. "We should also talk about the garage," he said finally. "I canceled the man who was coming. I am sorry for overstepping. I thought activity would fix grief. It did not." He cleared his throat and glanced at the hallway, where the blue tin box waited like a quiet witness. "I still think you should consider moving closer to us," he added, softer than before. "Not to manage you, to be near you." "Closeness is not measured in miles," I said. "It is measured in respect. You can live 10 houses away and still stand on the far side of a fence. Or you can live in another town and meet me at this table with honest eyes. Today you are closer because you came as a son, not a manager." He sat back and let the chair settle. "What do you need from me?" he asked. "Say it plainly." "I need you to keep your promises from last night," I said. "No locks changed. No sales. Daylight meetings. Paper first. I also need you to be clear with Erin about my boundaries. She does not have to agree, but she must respect them to stay in the same room." He nodded, slower this time, like each motion cost a small coin. "And the children?" he asked. "They ask why Grandpa is sad." "I am not sad," I said. "I am steady. Grief is heavy, but steadiness is strong. Tell them Grandpa is building something invisible. It looks like patience. It sounds like please and thank you. It feels like a hand on the shoulder saying, 'You can come home when you are ready.'" We went to the garage together. It smelled like pine dust and winter. I said each tool's name as I touched it: mallet, chisel, square, plane. He stood beside me and said the names too. He was slow at first, then firm, as if speaking a remembered prayer. We did not talk about prices. We did not talk about buyers. We talked about the shelves and which ones needed a brace. We talked about the bench vise and how it squeaked when turned too tightly. He laughed once when the vise complained. The sound was light and honest. Back inside, I opened a different envelope from the folder. It held a single page I had drafted years ago for emergencies. It was a simple arrangement with a trusted neighbor who owns a small real estate business. It allowed me to place a family in a nearby rental for a modest rate if their home became unsafe. It was not charity. It was a quiet option. I had spoken with the neighbor last week just to check if the option was still open. He said yes, because good people leave good doors unlocked. I have a question, I said to Jacob. If your house ever became unstable because of decisions you made, would you want your kids to feel chaos or continuity? He stared at the table until the wood grain looked like a river. Continuity, he said. Always continuity. Then here is an idea, I said. I can secure a short lease at a small place on Maple Lane. It would not be fancy, but it would be safe. I could place it in a trust with conditions that keep me at arm's length from your household decisions. If you ever need it, it is there. If you do not, it remains quiet. No one will know unless we say so. This is not leverage. It is a handrail in case the stairs go dark. He looked at me the way a person looks at a light coming through a cracked door. Hope and suspicion walked together across his face. Why would you do that for us? He asked. Because your children are my grandchildren, I said. Because Mary kept a table set for people who might be late. Because mercy is not the absence of boundaries. It is the strength to hold a boundary and still offer a seat when the rain starts. We did not sign anything that day. We wrote down the idea and a phone number. We wrote down 3 conditions to keep everything clean and accountable. We wrote down a promise to revisit the paper in January, if needed. Then we ate lunch like normal people. Sandwiches on good bread. Apples sliced with the small knife Mary favored. He looked at the empty chair across from me and said her name quietly. I let the silence answer, because some names do not require commentary. They require room. That afternoon, a courtesy email arrived from the HOA confirming the filed notice. It was short and friendly. 10 minutes later, a second message arrived from the bank with a scanned copy of the letter I had picked up. I saved both to the small flash drive and to a folder on the kitchen computer. I printed them again because woodmen like paper. I put the copies behind the manila pages and closed the briefcase with a click. The sound felt like a sentence ending in a period. Clear. Final. Gentle. Christmas Eve came with a thin snow. The service at St. Mark was full but quiet. Candles turned the sanctuary into a small city of light. I stood in the back again, not because I needed to leave quickly, but because I wanted to watch the faces. I saw Erin with the children near the third pew. She kept glancing at the door, then at her phone, then at the children's hands. Jacob arrived late and slipped in beside them. He did not see me. I did not need him to. After the service, there was a potluck in the hall. Paper plates, crock pots, and laughter that felt earned. Mr. Jenkins sat with a group from Maple Lane and gave me a thumbs up across the room. Miss Cole carried a tray of cookies that looked like tiny stained glass windows. The children found the table with the gingerbread pieces and began to build. Erin approached with a careful smile and asked if we could talk. We stepped near the coat rack where the noise sounded like distant surf. I told him you were right, she said, eyes not leaving the children. About the locks, about the tools, about the words we used. I thought moving fast would feel like love. It felt like control. I am sorry. She brushed a crumb from her sleeve and kept watching the small hands press icing into corners. I still want you closer, she added, but I want you to choose it. Thank you, I said. Closeness chosen is warmer than closeness arranged. I will visit more. You can come to Maple Lane when the roads are clear. The library has a corner the children will like. And the hardware store sells hot chocolate packets near the register. There are better doors than garages for families to gather around. Later, as we stacked chairs and folded tables, Jacob finally reached me. We stood with our coats on and our hats in our hands. He looked older in the kindest way. It is a gift when a man looks older for the right reasons. "Dad," he said, "I read Mom's letter last night. Boundaries are a kindness. She was speaking to me when she wrote it. I hear her now." "She wrote it to both of us," I said. "We both needed the reminder. We will keep it where we can find it." We walked outside together. The parking lot glittered beneath the pole lights. Aaron buckled the children into their seats and waved across the roof. "We will see you on Sunday," Jacob said. "We will bring soup. You can show the kids the workbench if you like. We will keep our hands behind our backs, unless invited." He smiled at his own joke and shook his head. "See, I am learning." "Measure twice," I said. "Cut once. Speak kindly. And let the rules carry what words cannot." He drove away slowly, not to make a point, but because the roads asked for care. I stood until the taillights turned into small red buttons on the dark coat of the night. Then I drove home with the heater doing its best and the radio low. The porch light glowed as I turned into the drive. I sat for a moment and watched it. It was not a spotlight or a siren. It was a promise kept nightly, one quiet bulb at a time. Inside, I placed the briefcase on the hall table and opened the blue tin box. I slipped Mary's letter back into the top. I added a note of my own that said, "Today we built a bridge with paper and patience." I dated it and closed the lid. The furnace clicked, and the house answered with a familiar hum. I washed my hands at the kitchen sink and smiled at the way hot water loosens winter from bones. Before bed, I walked to the garage and turned on a single lamp. The bench looked ready for work. I tightened the vise and listened for the old squeak. It sang its small, loyal song. In that quiet, with the light catching sawdust like falling snow, I felt the seasons shift inside me. Not away from grief, but away from noise, toward order, toward steady, toward the kind of hope that does not perform. This is what natural consequences look like when they are applied gently. No shouting, no scenes, no victories painted on someone else's loss, just notices filed, letters kept, and a porch light left on for the people who finally remember their way home.